So just to go back a little bit, wanted to welcome you to the first of our May webinar series celebrating Drug Court Month. And in our world, we are celebrating Healing to Wellness Courts as part of the problem solving court families. And so we wanted to start this month off with a traditional view of treatment. And I'm going to introduce and working with Native American clients. Thank you, Janice or Angie. Um, so I want to introduce a very important person to me, someone I call brother. He's not only my brother in the field of substance use disorder counseling, but we were just reminiscent of how we met many years ago. And we met through humor and teasing one another. And he's become my brother over the years. And I have great respect for him and the work that he's doing in his community. And so, Mr. Bear Medicine, would you please introduce yourself?
Well, good morning, everyone. Oki nigsuko wax nistua nitaniku mako yisikan. Nistua skapi pikani sexicate sitapi. My name's Durand Bear Medicine, and my Blackfoot name is Wolf Robe. And you heard me say mako yisikan. It's the word that was passed that belongs to my great grandfather, and so I'm actually named after him. And his picture is in one of the slides here. And so I'm part of the Blackfoot tribe, the South Piegan. This here is Mako Yisikan. Um, his name was Old Man Fish Wolf Robe. And so that was my grandmother's dad. And she gifted me that name through proper protocol. And so that's the name that I carry. I'm also part of the Sixagate Sitapi, the Blackfoot Confederacy. And I have been working in the field of addiction for about 18, 19 years. Have been still a licensed addictions counselor and a certified chemical dependency counselor through the Northwest Indian Drug and Alcohol Board, and have served on numerous boards, which you'll see in one of the intro slides. So I'm happy to be here. I look forward to sharing and passing on whatever information I can to hopefully assist and help you be able to understand and work with specific concepts as we move forward.
Next slide, please. Thank you.
And so with everything that's happening with this presentation, which I've done over time, probably the last 10 years or so, when we first did this presentation, these two gentlemen were part of the team that I had at the treatment center. Sheridan Ground, who was our cultural counselor, as well as Daniel Edwards, who was our cultural counselor. And both of them have been encased in a lot of our Blackfoot culture for a number of years, both belonging to the what they call the Ginatsu Mitex, the Brave Dogs or the Crazy Dogs Society that we have. Both of these individuals are members of that, but we're driving forces in putting this cultural encampment together that we ran through the treatment center. And so when we did this presentation, this picture was taken outside, and it was the first time it was done before, I'd say, about 80 people throughout the state of Montana. A lot of were executive directors, counselors, different things like that. So it was good to showcase the culture that we had and what we were doing that was at that time not very, it was kind of a little unorthodox as far as treatment therapies and concepts. So I've taken this concept on for the last 10 years, where I met Chris in this leadership academy, and I had made this my project and kind of streamlined and modified it to fit my personal journey. But that personal journey is probably similar to a lot of our clients that we serve, or even ourselves. And it helps make that connection to what we can do to connect with people that we're serving. So these two individuals are very monumental in my life, and I'm very thankful that today we're still very close, and that they've had the influence on me to encourage me to continue being the person that I am. So these are who those individuals are that helped kind of streamline and put some of this together.
Thank you, Durand. Next slide. So Um, I just wanted to also let you know, please let us know where you are coming to us from in the chat box. Please feel free to enter your home community or agency wherever you're working, coming to us from. So, Gowatsiopa, Hinume, Chris Pacheco, Goaikama, Zenahano, Sharshkawashti, Bijou, um, Makwa Nindodia. So I've just introduced myself in Laguna. I'm Chris Pacheco. I'm from the Pueblo of Laguna in the state of New Mexico. I am also a quarter Red Lake Anishinaabe. So these are who I come from. So this is my Sababa, my grandfather, Robert Pacheco Senior, She. She means that he's gone now. He is passed on. He was once the governor of our tribe. This is my grandmother, Lena Pacheco, She, Sanaya, um, Lena. She is also gone now. This is my dad's mother. This is my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, Eleanor Jahati. Uh, she was once married to my grandfather, who is Patrick Desjardins. This is where our Ojibwe blood comes from. These are who I come from. My grandmother was very instrumental in showing me how to be a Pueblo woman, how to do things, the things that we do on feast days, the things that we do within our home. She was very instrumental in that. My grandmother, Eleanor She, she was very instrumental in showing me how women can have careers. She was a long-term IHS nurse. She wore the cap and the very starched white uniform. And this is my grandfather. I unfortunately did not meet him until later on in his life, and he passed when I was 2 years old. So, but these are people who are really important, and this is where I come from. Next slide. Sa Naishtia Gilbert Pacheco She, Sanaya Patricia Pacheco. These are my parents. My father is gone now. He's been gone for a couple years now. He was instrumental in showing me how to come back to the community and give back to the community. He was a Navy veteran, and he came home to the community. He served in certain areas in our tribal government, and part of our community. My mother, she's still with me. She was a drug and alcohol abuse counselor for 35 plus years. She was my in-house clinical supervisor. She helped me propel my career as a drug and alcohol abuse counselor. So I'm very grateful to her. Even today, I will still go to her and we'll still discuss, certain things in the field. So this is where I come from. So when you're working with Native communities, excuse me, when you're working with Native communities and Native individuals, uh, sometimes you will be asked, who are your people? Where do you come from? And I know as a licensed drug and alcohol abuse counselor, which I am here in the state of New Mexico, um, oftentimes we're taught, to separate. Don't share any personal information. You need to have that client therapist or client clinician relationship. But in tribal communities, it's important for us to know who you are and where you come from, where your blood comes from, especially if you are working within your own community like I did. I have often, come across individuals who will say, "Oh, I know your dad. I know your mom. I remember them." And, it just opens up things and it helps us to kind of build rapport with the clients that we're working with. So as I'm looking at the chat box, it's great. Thank you so much for um, letting us know where you're from. So next slide. So we wanted to just give a little bit of a historical context of because Durand's going to take over a majority of this, all of this presentation. Uh, but I just want to give a little bit of a historical context of where we've come from and where we have gone to, which is, you know, utilizing the traditional techniques that Durand and his group have developed. Of course, we have the historical trauma in Native America, which was brought to us, or, really brought to our attention by Maria Yellow Horse Braveheart, and and the development of this model and understanding why lives of many Native Americans are not the American dream, but also just to let you know that it's unique from tribe to tribe and individual members or citizens. They have their own uh, way of, defining historical trauma within their communities. So that is something for us to take into consideration. Next slide. Again, just the core concepts of historical trauma, that's a cumulative emotional and psychological wounding over one's lifetimes, and goes on from generation to generation. And for Native individuals, it's a loss of culture, which was really part of the whole way that the federal government dealt with us, was to eradicate our culture. And so that's very traumatic. Also, the family and the society and economy, the way that we normally operated as Native individuals, um, these experiences were traumatic. And there was such a response within our biology, within our social, the way we communicate, our social systems, and lasting psychological symptoms. um, so some of the things that have lasted through the generations, through our environment, things such as having mines on our tribal lands, having water disputes, having land disputes, having fishing rights. I was just up in Wisconsin, and that was one of the big themes, was fishing rights or hunting rights, those kind of things. The psychology, and then also prejudice and discrimination tends to be one of those things that it unfortunately possibly still happens. Next slide. And then also we have this, our federal INDA policy. There was an official policy for us as tribal individuals. There are certain points in our history that that are key. Uh, you know, we have the boarding school eras, and it's individuals. I came across an article recently. Individuals from boarding schools don't say I attended boarding school. They say I survived boarding school, especially the older individuals. It's this survival, like it was a traumatic situation that they survived. Also, we look at, our Religious Indian Freedom Act, which I think really is credits to how and Durand and his group have utilized and really implemented. So we've come from all of this. We've come from all of these, themes that we've gone through. And we've learned that we should kind of go back to the old ways, that the old ways are helping us. And this is really where Durand and his group have really spoken to me and really inspired me. And I really love to hear their story. So I'm going to turn it over to my brother Durand. And next slide. Just another slide. Go ahead, next slide.
All right. Well, I guess I'll say good afternoon now. The time has switched here for me, but so in doing this presentation, which has been very near and dear to me for all of these years that I've done it, and to being able to make a lot of the changes and hopefully having an impact on people that have heard this story. And so as you can see by this slide here as referenced, again, my name, the credentials that I carry. I just got my master's 3 years ago in health administration. I've been a licensed addictions counselor since 2014 and been a CDC counselor since 2008 and have worked in the field since 2006 though, and have kind of crawled the ranks through the first 10 years that I was at the treatment center. And I was recently the director there, but had left to become the clinical director here for our behavioral health program. And so kind of doing a few of those. At MSU Northern is where I received my bachelor's in community leadership and minored in Native American studies. But that has been helped me understand the leadership roles that we play, not necessarily by title, but by the influence that we have as a people and the impact that we have on our communities. And then my health administration degree from Montana State University Billings. And the neat thing about that is in 2022 was when my daughter graduated high school. And she's actually there in the left-hand corner in the pink tank top. She's 20 years old right now, but at that time, 2 weeks after I received my master's, she graduated from Browning High School as a salutatorian. And so she got to watch me walk across the stage, and I got to watch her receive her diploma and give the speech that she did, which was an amazing speech that she had asked me to help her write. And why I think that fits in so perfectly is because in community leadership, I've learned that the roles we play in our communities, we ask ourselves what makes what? Does a good leader make a good community, or does a community make a good leader? I think that's very reciprocal, and it can go either way. And I think with my daughter, the way she gave the speech, asked me to help her write it, but she's not a public speaker. But she had said, Dad, I don't want to speak. But the valedictorian said she doesn't want to speak. So I'm going to do it. I feel I owe my classmates this. And that made me very proud because she doesn't even realize the impact that she had on me to understand that, we often define leadership by those titles and those roles. But her stepping up to do that really made an impact on her peers. And I think even the administration, and more so me as her dad. And so it was something that I was able to be very proud of. And so, of course, you see my certifications here, the acknowledgments of public service. I've been certified since 2008 with Northwest. I've been a Montana LAC since 2014. I've been a NADAC member since 2014. I've been a MADAC board member from 2014 to 21, but I just recently joined them back in November. And so I've rejoined that board. I was with Region 8 from 2019 to 2020, 22, 23. And so that board has since gone away due to a lack of funding. But I was one of 3 members from Montana that represented the 6 states that were part of that region. So very heartwarming to have been asked to do that. And then I served on the board of behavioral health for Montana and as an LAC member and did that for 5 years. And it was something that really spoke to me because that's often where changes happen between Western culture and the traditional aspect. And so thankfully now with the influence I've had at that level, under the Montana Administrative Rules of Montana, Rule 24, 219, 2301, under unprofessional conduct and code of ethics, there's actually a rule in there that I've helped people understand that ethically as we're taught in Western society, like Chris touched about earlier, but in Westernized society, ethics kind of drive what they want us to do. Like, oh, well, you can't tell people where you come from. Don't show them this. Don't show them that. But in the Native communities, when you come in that different world, as we all kind of know, is that under that rule, I was able to let them know that, yeah, ethically, we might not be able to accept gifts from clientele. But when you come from a traditional community, that's a sign of respect and disrespect. If I turn someone down with food or with anything, that's a sign of disrespect. And so they actually changed the language and it went through legislation to say that from here on out, that through in a culturally appropriated setting, we can accept those gifts and we could give that to the organization or do something with it to help promote what we're doing. So it's understanding that and changing that was a big thing that I was hoping to help people understand. And thankfully now it's still written into the Montana administrative rules. So that's the kind of influence that I've wanted to have. And I feel like I've been able to do. And so getting to serve in these capacities has been very helpful to me. And then recently I was just came off being the Montana, Wyoming recovery professionals president for 2 years. They were trying to get me to stay on longer, and I told them no. I got a life, so I was able to step away from that. But I was very thankful for that opportunity. But with my culture, being able to do that, I'm often teaching people this is what it can do for you, and I'm that example. As you see in the left-hand picture, last summer we were able to perform for, if many of you guys know who Yo-Yo Ma is, the famous celloist, we were able to perform for him and talked about collaborating music at some point. So we were able to meet him and to talk with him about some of those opportunities that the drum has brought to us. On the left side, on the right-hand side there, the picture of me and my wife was 2 days later after we met Yo-Yo Ma. We were actually got asked to perform at this concert here in Montana, and we were able to open up and perform for Tyler Childers. If many of you guys know who that is, and his music. I had a chance to talk to Tyler personally about the culture and the drum and music, being an artist ourselves. And so those are some things that, with my beautiful wife here, Kelly Bear Medicine, as you see here in the picture, we've been together for 23 years now. And her and I have been able to break the cycle in both of our families to raise our daughter without substance use in our home. And we've been able to kind of show and demonstrate that through the life and the path that we have walked together. Right below that, you see my daughter and our German Shepherd. Of course, his name is Duke, based off back here, but my daughter named him. And so they've been really close. And so those are members of our family. This dog has been a huge member of our family. And so his full name is Duke Cameron Bear Medicine. But the Cameron comes from the name of the fans of Duke University, the Cameron Crazies. So my daughter wanted to name him that. And so lastly, below that, you see our drum group. These are my brothers, my nephews. We've been together this year for 30 years as a drum group. And as I talk about it later in the presentation, you'll kind of know why these are important to me. I want you to kind of study some of these, what you see here, because I'll close up the presentation a little bit about that. But this is our drum group, Young Grey Horse, Sikabutase. And we've been able to perform for a lot of places. We were nominated for a Grammy back in 1998. We sang on the set of Yellowstone 3 years ago for one of the episodes. Ultimately, we didn't make the cut, but we still received some monetary funding from them, which was great, just the opportunity. And then being able to travel all over the country and meet a lot of great people. And so the drum has been my way of life. And so that is something that that's very important. And these pictures are a representation of that, as well as the acknowledgments and the education and everything that is on this slide. So I'll come back to that slide at the end, but that will conclude the part for this slide. And so the focal point of this presentation has been about traditional treatment. What is it? What does that mean? And so these are some of the questions when we first put this together, and I was able to kind of take it a little further, was what is traditional treatment? How is this form of treatment different than the other forms of treatment for drug and alcohol? And what can I learn from it? What should I expect? Where can I find this kind of treatment? And can anyone teach it or be involved in it? These are going to be some of the questions that I will ultimately be able to answer throughout or pieces of this presentation. So these are some of the things we'll go through. So the first question we ask is, what is traditional treatment? What does that mean? So we could probably move to the next slide. What is the traditional treatment? So talking with one of our tribal elders, they said, well, the practice of using individual tribal beliefs that are following our customs, our values, and history, but they're associated by those ceremonies that we have, the sweats, the songs, the dances, consultation from any of our elders or spiritual leaders. But us as Pikani, we call it kipat the bisin or nipat the bisin with the N. Ni meaning singular, kipat the bisin is the plural aspect. But in our way, general way, it's just our way of life. We've always done it this way. We've always lived this way. So the way and the method that we treat is a part of our life. And so I will say, keep at the peace and keep at the peace and only. It's our way that we've always done things. So this is our elders' rendition of a lot of that, what they meant. But the reason why, as we go to the next slide, you'll see that. So we get into the westernized aspect. So I've been very familiar with CARF, as many of you have, if you've understood the accreditation piece. And so you look at their definition of what they've had in their manual, a professionally recognized approach that applies accepted theories, principles, and techniques designed to achieve recovery and rehabilitative outcomes for the person served. You put those two definitions side by side, they're technically the same thing. The language is different. However, through our theories and our principles, those are the customs and values that we have. We've always known about these things. The techniques that we do it is what we're going to be exploring through this presentation, the techniques and the manner, how we've been able to achieve that. So as we cover the three areas that I have, it's the concepts, the competencies, and the variations. And as we've talked about what that means and answers that question. And so it's what we're going to be going through as we go through that. And so we can go to the next slide. So when we talk about how is this form of treatment different than any other treatment, on the left-hand side here, that's what we envision today in Western society. I might have a client back here on this couch in a similar manner, talking to them about how to heal, how to deal with things, how to understand them, how to connect. And on the right here, through some of our archives and what we've had is a traditional tribe, we've had this gentleman named Calf Shirt, who was a Blackfoot spiritual leader. And he was able, as you see in the picture, many, many years ago, this is how he proved his power. This is how he proved the medicine that he had. And this is what he did to show people, you can trust in what I do. He would handle poisonous snakes and he would put them in his mouth and have never gotten bit in that aspect. But there's a lot of stories about this gentleman and how people went to him for healing. And so just as we would in Western society here and connect with our client like that, we would ultimately do the same with a gentleman like Calf Shirt. And so with my role as a licensed addictions counselor, my goal is to blend both of these worlds together and figure out how do we make that happen. And so using those concepts that we're going to be exploring here today. So this is how we would envision that. And this is, we're going to be taking those steps in between the both worlds that we have here. So we can go to the next slide. So in the concepts in the non-traditional versus traditional, the non-traditional, what I've talked about is the westernized world that we live in today. You know, we talk a lot about these titles and these variations that we have. We have psychologists, we have PhDs, we have these counselors, all of these different labels, titles that we've been given, but we've earned those. We've earned those rights to be there. And so through the way we've treated and the way we've done a lot of things like that, I've done a lot of, we've talked about treatment plans, the problems, the goals, the objectives, methods. That's how we've been designed to say, this is what a treatment plan should look like. But we talk about supportive resources through the communities. We have NA, AA meetings. We do Al-Anon Church, the Crucials, the pilgrimages. All of those are there for support. Credentials, the licenses and accreditations that we carry. Those are the degrees, the professional licenses, and the national and state standards, the administrative rules and the ethics that I've talked about. Those are all standards and things that we kind of a template that we lay out for ourselves to exist and operate in today's world. That's what's needed. It's necessary. However, you go into our traditional concept that we have our elders and our spiritual people, medicine men and women. For many of us that live in those communities, just like Calf Shirt, they've earned their right to be there like we have in this world. So although I have an MHA, an LAC, and a CDC behind my name, looks nice and fancy, but you get here to our elders and our spiritual people, there's a different way that's represented, how you hold yourself and how you carry yourself. But when we've conducted traditional treatment, the cultural based treatment, we've outlined activity plans because we know in activities that we do, such as, we're talking about pipe ceremonies, sweats. We know that going in, you're not going to say, well, I'm going to have a sweat from 1 to 2 and start on time and end on time. It doesn't work like that. And the pipe ceremonies, as our elders talk about, when I get up with the sun and I'm going to light my pipe, there's a process to that. And it's going to start when it starts and ends when it ends. And if you want to be a part of it, you're gonna understand and sit through all of that. So it's not time-based in those activity plans, but we do still outline goals. What do you hope to take away from this? What is the problem that you're dealing with? And the daily schedule, we might say we're going to wake up with the sun and do a pipe ceremony. We're going to talk about maybe a talking circle with an elder. Are we going to do these different things? We're going to have a drum ceremony. We're going to sit at the drum and go over some society songs or even just general power songs. We're going to connect in a specific way. And so we would develop that, but using those support services such as the sweats and the ceremonies, the prayer and the smudging, and just kind of getting together, understanding community-based stuff. But again, with those credentials and licenses, those honors, earned rights, and privileges, we've earned the right to transfer names, paint, to be a pipe carrier, to be a lodge and bundle keeper, protocols, but we like to be a Sundance, to participate in the Sundance. People have earned all of these rights, but you're not going to need a piece of paper or 270 hours of education to tell you that is what you're capable of doing. Like even like the thing I've talked about here is I have an ID here that tells me that whether am I Blackfoot? Well, according to this, it is. But is that necessary? Not really. But again, that's the world that we have to live in. We need a little plastic card to tell me that I can drive. That is a lot of things that are very different from what we're doing. And I know that we say, okay, well, we do need those things on this side, and I totally get that. And but going through the cultural aspect, this is what I think we put too much emphasis on the other while we're not imposing the rest and saving our traditional way of life to help our people. And the reason why I say that is one time when I went through a state review here, when I was running our outpatient program, one of the surveyors came in. We had this dialogue and had made this comment to me that stuck out to me. She said, "Who are we to come in and tell you guys how to treat your people when you guys know what works here best? You guys know what you have." And I've never thought of it that way till that moment. And ever since that day has always stuck with me, probably about the last 14, 15 years. And so that had a lot to do with the way I've envisioned the traditional treatment and the way this presentation went. So there's a lot of things that go into that, which I think, but if you look at these side by side, they're pretty similar. It's just the way you view them and how you understand them. We can probably argue all day about, well, yeah, we can do that. We don't need that. But I think simplistically, as our old people lived, they didn't complicate a lot of things. I think Westernized society has done that, has complicated too many things that has taken away the element for us to just really be human and to connect with people. And I think that's the big part that I've been able to do. So here in the state of Montana, I've had a lot of places where I've been able to connect with people because of them understanding this particular aspect and what this presentation represents. So we can move on to the next one. So as we've talked about those elders and those spiritual leaders, those men and women, we often see them as teachers, mentors, leaders, instructors. That's what we turn to them for. But their traits, the traits that we do look at them for is knowledge, skills, wisdom, values, and guidance. Just as we do our mentors and scholars that we have out there, we look to them for the same things. But you're going to get a very different rendition of that. These two elders here are Sheridan's parents, and they were the two elders that helped guide our encampment. On the left there is Elsie Ground. She is one of the leaders that we've had in one of our groups here. And so Sheridan's daughter, you can see here when she was a baby. Now she is 13 years old. But this was the way she had learned a lot of things and had grew up. The gentleman on the right is the late Rick Ground, Sheridan's father, who passed away a couple of years ago, but was a very influential figure in our community and a long time member of our Ginatsu Mitaks, the crazy dogs. And his grandson there, as you see, I can't recall his name, but this is how our young people learn. This is how we, myself as a student, learn. Even though I've earned my accolades and worked my way through life, I'm still those young people. And that's the lesson I've learned from my grandmother as well, who passed away 9 years ago. She was 86 years old, or 84 years old when she had gotten her AA degree in elementary ed. But she said and told me very openly, she said that people look to me as an elder, someone with all the answers. She said, but I don't have that. She said, I'm going to continue learning until Creator takes me back home. And then when I go into the next world, I'm going to start all back over and have to learn again. She said, so there's a lot of different ways that we see that. And so when I think about that, we're always just learning. And in a cultural standpoint, we're taught that to keep an open mind, that we truly never know what we know, but we want to continue learning. The thing that has complicated that, what I talk about and westernize, and I speak about this very openly, is that in the westernized aspect, is that when we reach that level of perhaps, say, PhD, sometimes that's where the learning stops, because we're not feeling that, yeah, I've earned my way there, but I now don't have to turn to anybody for anything. So I don't have to have anybody tell me what to do either. And that's just something you're not going to hear from our elders. They're open to learning. And I speak freely about that because I've been treated pretty bad by some people that had that mindset. Because you don't have this degree, who are you to tell me what I can learn or what I should be learning? And so that's very hard for me to understand when you're hearing our elders say, well, I agree with what you're saying. And I think you're right. This is what we should be doing. This is what we could do better. And I think that was been the huge difference with everything that goes on with that. And so my late great grandfather, who you're going to see in this presentation throughout, when I talk about him, he's going to be, he was one of the ones that used to give lectures and talks up in Glacier Park here. And he had his AA degree in Blackfoot Studies, but he was raised in that life, fluent speaker. He taught history and language at the Browning Public Schools. And he used to give these talks in the summer. We'd have people from back east come. And one of them came up to him and asked my grandfather, you know, I really enjoyed what you said. He said, I want to ask you this question. If you don't mind me asking, where did you receive your PhD from? My grandfather kind of laughed at him and said, I'm sorry to disappoint you, sir. He said, but I don't have that type of education. Everything I've learned is from what you see around here. This land, this community, all the knowledge that I have up here came from that. I've lived it. And this is what I'm teaching you guys. And so that reminds me of that. And so it kind of lets us know and kind of keeps us at bay that we need to keep our minds open and forever learning. We learn from our clients. We're not there to tell them how to manage and get sober or to deal with mental health crisis. We're here to also learn from them about how they can help themselves. And I think that's the aspect of individualized treatment. But for some reason, sometimes we get those titles and licenses. We feel we're that authority to impose that. And so I've used that in my life here. So the activity plans that we outline here, like in the morning, we might have a prayer session with an elder or a group, teach them about smudging. And I can tell you in a lot of our traditional treatment groups, there was a lot of adults that you would not assume that didn't know how to smudge. They didn't know what sipatsamo was, the sweet grass. They didn't know how to use it. They didn't know how to light it. They didn't know what the mannerisms to go along with that. They just didn't know. And that wasn't their fault of their own. It was just that stuff wasn't non-existent in their home. And if they've seen it sometimes, maybe they were afraid to take that on or to learn about it. So this was a chance for them to connect with that, learning how to use a pipe, how to smoke it, how to load it, how to watch all of that unfold in real time. And then about the craft. So we might do something like that, which we've done in the past. And then in the afternoon, you might break it up and say, well, let's sit down and have a talk. But we're going to also tell some stories. We're going to talk, and maybe in the evening, we might have a ceremony, and we're going to invite you to that so you can watch all of that. And as this picture shows, that's kind of what our elder had done in his little roundhouse that he had. He would have ceremonies, and then they would paint, they would smoke pipe, they would do these different things. But a lot of our participants got to be in there and learn from that piece of it. So that was huge and monumental for all of that. We can move on to the next one. So a lot of our traditional ceremonies that do offer therapeutic opportunities for healing, prayer, smudging that we've used with sweetgrass, cedar, sage, whatever is out there. But the focus of that is cultural identity, the individual identity, what that means. Mine was Mako Isik, and that's who I am as I've introduced myself. The Siksakate Sitepe, the Amskapi Pikani. That is who I represent. Singular, I'm Nitsitepi. I'm the real person that our language describes. Because before Columbus and all of that, we as Native people always just kind of known about ourselves being here. So we've said Nitsitepi, the real people. But then as I get into it, my English name is Durand. But in Blackfoot, I am Mako Isikan. That's who I am still as a singular person. But I'm Skapi Pikani. I'm part of the Blackfoot tribe now. I've been a part of that. So as I grow into the collectiveness, Siksakate Sitepi, the Blackfoot Confederacy, we're part of those 4 bands that are together. And that's who I am as identity. We want to teach our young people to come from just being, I'm Blackfeet, to who are you really? And I think a lot of that takes that approach of knowing how to find that. And that's what this represents. So the Okan was one of the places, perhaps like a Sundance or a church. This structure was one that we used as people here. The Okan is part of the Napi Nat Dusi, the what we do with the sun. And so my great grandfather, the one that was on one of the slides earlier, where I get my name from, his power came from the sun. And so when I wear yellow, when I use yellow, that is a representation of the name I carry, but what my grandfather does as a person. So the sun was very influential in our life. So we can move on to the next. So these pictures just depict a couple of activities we did, learning how to make moccasins, the hand drums, and the rattles. But the neat thing about that is as they were putting them together is that they got to learn what that all meant. As you're piecing these together, this is what it represents, the drum. You could use that in a lot of our ceremonies and our sweats, but you can also use it to keep yourself busy and explore what the drum has to offer. Your moccasins, you will now have a pair to wear if you get invited to a ceremony or if you go to a place. You can use that to help fit in with where you're at and don't have to feel like, well, I don't belong here because I don't own that stuff. They were given the opportunity to learn what that represents. The rattle, knowing how to put that together and what that means when people either just buy them off. You can buy them off Facebook now. You see that there's websites that sell those. But if you make your own, there's a piece of you that goes into that, and it brings a lot of power, but it brings great pride and what that represents. So I think that's huge for our clients to be able to do that. So allowing them to do these activities has shown some of that what the Blackfoot culture means. So okay, we can go to the next one. And so part of those competencies is understanding some of the methods that we have. What are those rights to put on sweat lodges? It does take skill to put those up, finding the right blend of the willows that we use, the weight, the different things that you do to put that together. And our elders have shown us that. And that when it's used properly, though, that it has ability to help those suffering from ailments, sickness, and disease. And the reason why I say that is because during one of our cultural encampments, we had a young female that came in that was withdrawing from meth and was trying to leave the encampment. Our elder spoke to them, so they agreed to stay and came into the sweat for 4 days and essentially detoxed themselves and had stayed in treatment for 60 days and had gotten out and has now, moved on in life. But from the last time that I had spoke to them, they were still clean and sober. So our traditional ways have that power to do that. But we've been using these for a number of years, and there's a reason why they still exist today. There's a reason why our people still believe in these concepts and the competencies that come with that. But we got to learn how to do that. You can watch videos on YouTube of people in Denmark or over in Portugal or these other places that are having actual powwows, doing quill work, beading, and it's fantastic looking work. But it's something that, you got to understand what that represents. And that's what our goal is, to educate people, not say we're going to harbor these things. We got to, if we're going to pass it on and teach it, and let's just make sure that we're doing it the right way. So I've used that process from my grandfather, and that's why he believes so heavily in sharing those stories at Glacier Park, because people needed to know, when you step foot on this land, this is what you got to be mindful of. This is what you got to understand when it comes with that. But the sweat lodge we've used was for purification and does signify being in the womb of our mothers, that when we're in that enclosed space, when it's warm, it's safe, but it does have the ability to bring cleanliness, rebirth, and rejuvenation. That's what we use them for. So these were some of the teachings that I was taught by my grandfather, but also one of my uncles that is a Cree elder from Pigeon Lake, Alberta. So we balance some of that stuff out. So that's what this represents, the sweat lodge. And this was just one of them that we used at one of our sites. So we can go to the next one. So in the traditional and the non-traditional aspect, again, just kind of taking those words in general context. We've looked at the native traditions and how we were taught and how we learned. A lot of it was through oral and observation. You've heard our elders say, don't record that. Don't do any of that. I don't want this filmed. That was the old way, how we learned our language. If you wanted to do that, just as that picture right below this side is, if you wanted to learn that, you had to sit there. You had to pay attention, and you had to really understand what was happening. So you would learn how to conduct yourself in a ceremony with prayer and the language. You would pick those things up, knowing the community and the values of the individual. What is the behavior? And so we talk about, like with communication. So many of our Native Americans, we excel by talking, sharing versus writing and reading. And what I mean by that is, like with our clients, I could assign them a document here that says, take this home and write down 5 things that you want to know about your recovery and everything and bring it back. They may not do it, but if I ask them that question, tell me what you feel, they're going to go on for probably 45 minutes to an hour telling you what they feel. So I think, like with myself, I've been able to be learned that talking about it and sharing my experiences was a good way of communication versus writing. And so when I did my capstone in my master's program, and I speak very openly about this too, is I've been very opposed to the method of APA. Like I understand, I think it's great. I mean now, but I when I was going through that program, I hated it because I was thinking in my mind, who's the people that thought and made it that the entire world has to follow this one way? Who are they to tell me that in order to be a good writer, I have to write this way? And so, but being able to talk about it, it's a different story. And so some people excel that way, others don't. But writing and reading is one good way. So through our non-traditional aspect, the westernized side of it, the education and history was taught through the schools and universities, through the books, classroom setting. You have all of those materials available to you. It's only now that we're seeing our culture and our traditions being recorded just to save it, preserve it. But at one time, it was a huge no-no. But the communication that we teach about and learning about people, I've talked about in this example is like whether it's Caucasian or Native American professional, we talk about learning about people. Now, in my work, if I sat down with someone, let's say of African American descent, and we say, okay, well, in school we learned about like slavery and the civil rights and all this stuff. So I really understand where you're coming from. I know where you're coming from how your ancestors felt or how your family felt. And that could be furthest from the truth because nobody's going to understand that unless you've lived it and you've walked through that. Nobody's going to understand the boarding school era. As much as I talk about it or as other people talk about it, you're never going to understand what that was like and why things are missing from us today. The language, some ceremonies, some songs. It's because our old people were fearful of us getting abused over that. And that was one of the reasons why my grandfather didn't speak a whole lot of Blackfoot to me because he came from that era and he would rather just see us not do that because he was fearful. What if someone in the future does this to my grandson or my boy because he's speaking the language? So it would be very misleading because of the educational saying, well, in ethics, this is how you connect with your clientele. You got to let them know you understand, but we'll truly never understand that. So it's going to be something that we always have to, it could be a double-edged sword when you think about it. It might push someone away to say, well, you'll never understand where I'm coming from. You don't get me. And so when I talk about that too, it's about like how we mourn, how we grieve for people. It's been 30 years now since my grandfather has been gone. And I grieve for him still. Some days it's harder. Today would be one of those days where I'm reminded that what he's taught me. But I might think heavily about him today because of the role that he's played in my life. But when I go through therapy, if I was to go through therapy and the therapist said, well, been about 30 years now, I think you should kind of be past all of that. I would throw my middle finger up and tell them, who are you to tell me that, to get over this? Because we ultimately grieve the way we're going to, and that's going to be for the rest of our lives. We learn to accept, we learn to understand, but we never put those things away. But I've heard sometimes where people are saying that, well, we got these techniques, you got to kind of get over that now, it's holding you back. And that's just not the way it goes. So that can be a way that does hurt people. And so I think about my grandfather today and what that represents. And what I share is his legacy living on. We can go to the next one. I found this saying at one time, which I think was really great. I don't know much about Buddha. I don't know anything about that. But as these words spoke to me, that the candle cannot burn without fire, man cannot live without a spiritual life. That's us, this heart. Our spirit burns because we allow it to. We feed it the necessary energy and the things that ignite that. And so without that darkness, that's when our clients are lost. That's when we've been lost. We've all been there. When I regained my culture back and my grandma introduced me to the circle and the ceremonies again, that fire as a pilot light would in in a furnace. It lit up and my spirit was reborn. And so that what brings me to this next slide, the self-identity. We want to introduce people to who they really are. What have I learned? Finding strengths and weaknesses, and knowing culture. There are choices of whether I show up to that ceremony sober or high or clean, as the elder invited me. I have to make those choices, but I have to know, am I capable of doing that or not? And then living what culture expects. That is, we want them to be sober because you can't perform these things in a clouded mind. This picture here represents that. The story that goes behind that is when we were giving this presentation the first time, um, I was really after that shirt. As you see my grandfather in the background, he had this, my grandma made this shirt for him. And it had the teepees on the side and it was purple, really a pretty shirt, and mountains on the back here. And I really wanted that shirt. Here she buried it with him. And so I'd taken pictures from a video at all angles and I sent it to a sister-in-law of mine. And I told her I wanted this. So she replicated it almost to a T. Just what the shirt I am wearing is darker. But I was able to wear this shirt the day I gave the presentation. And as I was talking about it, went on break after the presentation was over. And this gentleman walks up to me as I was sitting outside and was like, "Hey, I don't want to be weird or anything." He said, "But I hope you don't mind me asking." He said, "You were talking about your grandpa in there and how he raised you and everything." He said, um, "We talked about this." He said, "I want you to know, like, I was watching you, and as you walked around and you talked, you held yourself really, really well. You spoke clear, your voice was loud." He said, "But then you handed the microphone to your one of your friends, and then you sat down." He said, "And I became fixated on you." He said, "And you sat down, you were hunched over, and had your hand on your chin. You were looking at the ground. I was just watching you." He said, "It looked like it was a different person. I was looking at a younger person." He said, "And then next thing, your friend handed you the mic, and you jumped back up, and you just switched, and it became this person again." He said, "So do you think your grandfather was here today?" And I said, "Absolutely." I said, "Everything I've talked about was because of him. Everything I've learned from him about how to conduct myself and how to understand and learn from people came from him." And so I had took this picture and I blended it together on one of my phone apps back in the day. And it was kind of looking at each other. And that's what we search for as we're guiding clients to sobriety and finding that. Know where you come from and who has been that person in your life. For me, it was this individual, Sipia Puwawaka, night walker. His name was Wayne Bear Medicine. He was the one that raised me since I was 6. I'll be 46 this year. And so he was the one that taught me what it was to be Pikani, the Amskapi Pikani. So this picture represents that, and that's how the story drove that to, okay, this is what self-identity is. So that's how this picture came to be. These are the things that we want them to learn from that in that way. And here comes the Coach K reference. I've followed Coach K for a long time. You can see I'm a huge Duke fan. But when I first bought my first book, this quote came out, jumped out at me right from page 1. And it's in all forms of leadership, whether you're a coach, a CEO, or a parent. There's 4 words that, when said, can bring out the best in your team, your employees, and your family. I believe in you. Those 4 words can mean the difference between the fear of failure and the courage to try. Why those are so significant to me is I've heard those words a few times, but one of my former mentors, who was the director of our treatment center here, pulled me aside one time and said, "I'm pretty tough on you here because one of these days you're going to be in this chair where I'm at. You're going to be in my seat." He said, "And I truly believe that." He said, "But it has to be up to you." He said, "But the reason why I'm harder on you than I am other people is because I see these things." He said, "But it's because I believe in you." And that was before I read this quote. And so when I went back to see that, that spoke to me. And this gentleman was right, because when I got my master's and came back, I became the director of the treatment center. And I sat in the very spot he was. And he was the first to congratulate me. And after I graduated, he came up personally to see me and talk to me. But those words stuck with me every single time. And so Coach K has been a big part of that. I followed the Duke program since I was 9 years old and have adopted a lot of those concepts in. I have a lot of the books here of Coach K at home as well, but I've used those in my services and my client care. So those what I kind of bring in. So we can go ahead and move on. And so the last part that we have is where can this form of treatment be found? Well, pretty much every reservation that you go to, there's going to be those traditionalists or the people that live this way of life. They're going to be found. You're going to run into these urban communities where there's Native Americans there. Missoula, Great Falls, Billings. We have urban centers there where people can go and find help and connect with tribal members from other populations that are there. And then wherever there's culture, there's traditional help. And I think that culture, in a lot of sense, is what we make of it. For me, it's Umskapi, Piikani culture. For an Irish person, there's a culture because there's a language. There's a way that they've lived life. There's a lot of these things that people believe they don't have, but culture is everywhere. The culture we develop at work, culture we develop in our professions, those things. So as we share that out, the goal of this presentation is to express those cultural differences. Can anyone teach it or be involved in it? For my grandfather's belief and what I believe and why I share the information I do is because of my great grandmother here, Mary Ground. Her Blackfoot name was Grasswoman, but she was not. There's conflicting stories, but the story I heard from my grandmother is she was not a tribal member. She is Caucasian, but we found her. The people found her in this tall grass and they adopted her. So that's why her name is Grasswoman. But she went on to become one of our most influential leaders in our community. She passed away at the age of 107. She was a fluent speaker. She led the ceremonies, gave names. But as we go back to that Buddha quote, her light, pilot light, wasn't driven by blood. It was driven by her spirit and her willingness to learn the ways and what she was taught. This gentleman here on the right is Bart. He lives around here in Browning, but he has picked up some of the language, has been helpful in some of our ceremonies, and has joined up with all of that. But he took the willingness to learn some of that. So whatever we can teach and pass on to keep things going, because a lot of our tribal members are not doing that. So we want them to be encouraged that if anybody else can do it, you're a direct descendant of that. You're going to be able to pick that up as well. So that's what this represents. You can move on to the next one. So the last part of it here is the outcomes. So this graph kind of articulates that what the outcomes were from 2012 to 2016. You could see how many of the males and females that we've had in the group, represented by the green and the blue. And the yellow was how many participants for that particular group that we had. And as you could see, every year it's increased up until the 2015, where we had 41 at one time that were involved at some point in our cultural treatment. So with the staff approval, what we mean by that is if they've successfully completed the treatment program and have gotten, kind of, in a sense, I hate to use this term, but it's like graduated from this level of care to something else. So the staff approval means that. Again, staff approval is if they've walked out on their own accord, or if we've had to discharge them because they've violated or done things that went against the policies or the regulations of the facility. So that's what that means. And we've kind of talked a little bit about that. So you can see some of those numbers in certain areas have been higher or lower, but it just depends on the person's willingness to have been engaged in that therapy. So that's what that means. And these were the outcomes from the times that we have done it. 2016 was ultimately the year that I left. So from the treatment center. So whether this model went on for that time, I don't know, but this is what I was been able to be a part of. So move on to the next one. And so lastly, I just always acknowledge Dr. Joe Gahn, who, if many of you know, is one of the professor of psychology down in Harvard, but was very influential in putting this model together and is a great friend and colleague that I still rely on today. And this video that I've set in here is called You Got to Prove the Power, which is on YouTube. It's about a 7-minute video. He talks about how culture was big in his community and it's a great video. So if you get time, check that out. He's got a website called gonetowar.com, I believe. So it's just if you check some of those out if you're not familiar with him. And then Pat Calflooking was a person that told me he believed in me and was a great influence in my life. Daniel and Sheridan again, Rick and Elsie, and then the mentor I had in the Leadership Academy, Ray Slick from the Meskwaki tribe. Kristina, I both know him very well, but he was one that was very heavy in culture, and that's why him and I connected as mentee and mentor. So our minds and our hearts were driven by the exact same thing. So that's the big part of that. So we can move on to the next one.
So, brother, before we listen to your group, I just wanted to point out if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box. But we're going to be able to get to listen to a very big part of Durand's culture and some of the things that he's done. But also wanted to just let you know how some of these things apply to Wellness Court. Durand talked a little bit about how sometimes our clients or participants are not always oriented toward writing type kind of things. And I know that in our Healing to Wellness Court practices, sometimes we'll say, oh, write a paper on time management, write a paper on this. Um, just be mindful that some of our participants may not be, they may not have that's not how they communicate. If they can provide you with a recording, if they can tell you certain things, or if they can come up and express in a different way, just to be mindful that a lot of our participants are not always geared towards that, and also how we respond to their behavior. So that I just wanted to add that in as a how we work in Healing to Wellness Court. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. But I'm going to turn it back over to Durand so he can tell you about what we're going to listen to. Thank you, brother.
All right, yeah. So you can go ahead and play the video, and I kind of just talk about that. And so during this time in 2014, I was struggling with what I was doing mentally and physically. And so I lost my drive for singing. And so we didn't have any of our drums at that time. But an elder came up to me and said, "Where's your guys' drum group? You guys haven't been traveling." So I told him that we were still together. So, but I was gifted as the role as a drum keeper. And you see me here in this video messing with our drum. I am the sole drum keeper for our group and was gifted that right by a Blackfoot elder. And so I care for the drum. I take care of all the drums that we have. So that's my role. I bring the drum closer to my take care of it. This video is when we first came back out, and I was eager to go to this powwow with my brothers. And so the spirit was reignited through that. And so you see me really putting this together because it was the first time in a long time that I felt that way. And so as we get this, you'll hear the song. One of my late brothers gifted us this song. So we sang it during the powwow here, and he was right next to us and got to watch the song that he put together. And a couple weeks later, that individual passed away. But we were able to probably heal his heart, knowing that this song has lived on. So with me, you're guiding and directing your drum, but I'll let you guys listen. Of course, you see me here in the camouflage hat, the leader. And this is what I do with my brothers. And this is what everything that we did as one great host.
So we pause it just a little bit so we can take some questions. We're a little bit over time, and we want to thank you for staying with us. But if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I'm not sure if we can have people uh, unmute and ask questions, but if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Also, at this time, I want to extend our sincere gratitude to my brother Durand. He has provided this same presentation for us in Montana at the state conference. So it's been great. It's been great to work with him. We've known each other's for a very long time, so it's great for us to collaborate like this. And I just also wanted to let you know that please, we appreciate your comments. We appreciate your feedback. This really helps us to improve and provide the presentations that you want. And we like you to take some time to please fill out this evaluation. It's a QR code. You can aim your cell phone camera at it and it'll take you to a link and you can please fill it out. Also, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. But again, this is the first in our series of celebrating Drug Court Month, which is in May. I know we're getting started a little bit late, but we will go on into June. And just wanted to thank you all for joining us. And I'm looking at the chat box comments and I'm seeing that people are saying miigwech. I like the lesson and appreciate the song.
And I
So,
would like to say one
Durand.
last thing. I'd like to say one last thing before we close out. The thing that I said about the first slide was that everything that has been represented there, the accolades, the things that I've been able to earn in my life, many people don't know that unless I speak about it. But why it's so significant and important to me, especially in the court aspect, is I've I'm labeled as a felon in my life. I've went through the court system. I've been able to overcome that, and all of that stuff, that most of that has been done after the fact. And so I've had to make that choice to either better my life or be what society wanted me to be. And so breaking those cycles, going back to school, doing all this stuff, raising my daughter the right way, it's all been done because I've chose to give up drugs and alcohol. And I use my influence to help other individuals realize that there's purpose in your life too, and that you can do the same things I can, although that label says you're a felon for the rest of your life. That has not defined me, never will. And it's something that I've worked hard to overcome. And so all of that would not be possible without a system, or, like in my aspect, a probation officer that changed my life and gave me a lot of encouragement and helped get me off federal probation early. And now that same office has reached out to me to go and present to them in August to talk about the working with individuals in Indian country and how can we better improve that. And so that office has reached out to me now and has set that for August. So I'm going to use that. And it's because of the hard work that I put in, is why that they've reached out for that, knowing the passion I have, the heart that I have. But we use our voice in a lot of different ways. And so when I speak about being that, it's just a piece of my life, but it's not who I am. The first slide is who Durand Bearmanison is. This presentation is a representation of what got me there. And so that's the ultimate goal, is whatever you have in your community resource-wise, use them. Take the time to use, and don't be afraid to use those, because yes, you're going to have those governing boards that tell you maybe that's not right. But as I've been able to speak up in my state, in my communities, they've been able to listen. And I think that's a huge thing that we look for. So again, thank you. And I'll say kita kita matsin. We'll see you again.
Go ahead. Thank you, brother. Angie, any closing words or anything I might have missed?
Only to mention that I added a list of the upcoming webinars in June for National Treatment Court Month. They'll be on Thursdays, June 5th, June 12th, and June 26th. And if you want to take a look at the titles of the webinars, I put them in the chat for you.
Thank you, Angie.